Everybody, welcome to another amazing panel brought to you by QueerVox and produced by our friends at the Halp Network. Thanks so much to them for putting this on. Please check out the Halp Network and all of their educational offerings. They're really, really cool. At the Halp, THNEA, yes, the Halp Network Educational Academy. I always remember the acronym, but never the... So I'm JP Karliak. I'm the founder of QueerVox, and I am so thrilled to be able to bring this panel to the world this evening. Dubbing and anime have been huge topics that have come up within our QueerVox community and also just on our socials and everything that people are so interested in. And there's so many nuances that are specific to the anime and dubbing life. So. Anyway, we have an amazing moderator this evening. If you have any questions, doing a Q&A later, don't put it in the chat. You can write anything you want. Wait, other way. You can write anything you want in the chat, but if you have specific questions, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. That way we can kind of pick them out and make sure that we get to those. All right. Without further ado, she has been a working actress, voice director, ADR writer, and casting director in animation for over 2 decades. She is absolutely an amazing talent and a good friend. Please welcome the incomparable Stephanie Sheh.
Hey, y'all.
Yay.
I will be moderating. Before we start introducing our panelists, I just wanted to say a little blurb and just to acknowledge that, the queer experience is not a monolithic experience. We all have different experiences. And this is designed to be a good, safe space. If we have differing opinions, let's keep an open mind. And we're not here to really say that we're the experts or anything or have all the answers to questions. We're just about sharing our experiences, and hopefully that experience can help somebody. Also, panelists, feel free. This is really it's about discussion too. I have some questions lined up, but if you have questions for each other, if you want to go off on a tangent, I give you permission. So without further, I didn't even think what order we're going to do the introductions. I was going to ask for volunteers, but do we have volunteers out of the panelists to introduce yourselves, or do you want me to pick?
Well, now that you gave those eyebrows, I feel like I want you to pick. I want you to introduce James first.
What? No,
well,
James.
How did you get me?
James. All right. All right. We have a limited amount of time and a lot of stuff to discuss. So, James. Yes. You're introducing yourself, Carrie. You've been voluntold by Carrie. Take it away, James.
All right. Oh, thank you, Carrie. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm the baby dubber here, and I'm here under slightly false pretenses in that I can't wait to hear what all of the rest of them are going to say. I don't really have much experience in anime. Most of my dubbing is either live action. There's a whole plethora of new Netflix shows from Korea and from Japan that are live, kind of soap operas and things like that I've done dubbing for. I have done some movies. White Snake, that was directed by Stephanie, and it was a wonderful experience. When Marnie was here, which is a Studio Ghibli film. And I've done some voice matches for the foreign movies going to English dubbing. So that's me. Carrie, perhaps you'd like to go next.
Oh, I would love, James, thank you so much. That's so sweet of you.
Of course.
So I'm Carrie Caronen, and I am a voice actress who is also an ADR adapter for foreign language content. And I've been directing ADR for about 5 years now, both anime and live action. And I had the pleasure of working on Veneno for HBO Max last year. And I actually used to, one of my first jobs was I was hired by Stephanie and her company. And I'm happy to be here to sort of share my experiences in terms of how I try to actively be conscientious about representation in dubbing. Casey?
Yes, Carrie? Yes.
Introduce
You're up,
yourself.
Casey.
Okay.
You're up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Mongolo. I'm a voice actor. I've been voice acting for about 15 years now, but mostly things picked up once I moved to Los Angeles about 4 years ago. I've had the honor to be directed by the lovely Carrie Caronen on projects like Gundam Seed and Neon Genesis Evangelion and Veneno recently too, which was really exciting to do. Being brought in for that was really, really cool too. Yeah, just being a, queer actor, kind of doing this stuff. It's really cool to see that there are casting directors and people like you and Stephanie that are really okay with this stuff and understanding and are not just like, oh, that's weird, that's dumb, I don't get it. We're gonna get straight people, whatever. And it's like, we're gonna cast appropriately for this, and we're gonna understand this because this is something that's important. So I, really love that about, you guys. And so, yeah, thank you. But that's pretty much all there is to know about me. Nothing too special, but yeah. And how about Melly, if you'd like to go next?
Hi, nice to meet you. Let's see, I know everyone here actually, I think personally at this point, except Casey. So very nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Melly Grant. I'm a voice actor. I work primarily in anime, although I've worked on a couple of video games as well. I am currently operating out of the Dallas market, so you can mostly hear me in Funimation titles. I grew up focused on theater. I got my BFA in drama, and I then spent about 10 years doing just about anything but pursuing a career in the arts, because it was easier to hide from my transness and turn screws for a living than it was to come out and work in the arts. And then, as I like to say, my Siri is buzzing right now, so she's going to answer me in a second. I need to get that thing across the room. I like to say that eventually my heart caught up with me, as well as I was on some really terrible meds at the time, I like to joke, and I eventually decided to drop everything and move across the country and try to do this thing. Most recently, you can hear me in Assault Lily Bouquet as Misuzu, Yukimitsu in Skate Leading Stars, also Katella and Majikayo in Dragon Ball Super, and Demaria in Fairy Tail. I'm going to be brutally honest on this panel. I'm going to be raw, and I want to say that up front so that you don't think I'm either A, delusional and can't recognize my own successes, B, trying to gatekeep any of you, or C, just the saddest panda. I love the work that I do, and I'm so happy to share this panel with you. So in the spirit of that love, we will be spilling as much tea as is not under NDA.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so excited. To start off, I would love to just jump right in and kind of ask you guys how you feel about not just the dubbing space, but voiceover space, and maybe even the dubbing space compared to the greater voiceover space. Do you find it to be a queer-friendly space? And in terms of professionally, your identity, is that something you are comfortable and open with in a professional setting, or is that something that you have had to adjust for professional setting? I'm gonna let people who feel most passionate speak up first, unless you guys are all really shy, and then I will become like Carrie and start calling on people.
I would say that for me, I've been in the business for since about 1990, and I never hid the fact that I was gay. When we were adopting my son from Vietnam, told everyone about it. There's never been a moment for me where being queer has come into play. But I would also say that if it does come into play, I have no idea. Like, do you know what I mean? whether I get a part or don't get a part, I have no idea what's going on the other side. But as far as my working relations with everyone, I've never had to hide it at all. I'd say for me, my Asianness plays a much bigger factor in the roles I audition for and that I get than the fact that I'm queer. So.
That's really interesting, and I think your Asianness is probably a lot more visible and identifiable more immediately than your sexual orientation. So
until I open my mouth. And then...
Fair. We'll get to that later about sounds and Casey, do you have any experiences you would like to share?
I do, yeah. So when you were talking about dubbing compared to other types of VO, like games, AAA games and commercials, in dubbing, I've found that there are often times where I will be not allowed to even audition for projects if the studio knows, if the casting director knows that I am gay or LGBT or non-binary in any way, shape, or form. Just an example, there was a studio that I worked with quite a bit, and once they found out that that I was gay and non-conforming, I just didn't care about what people perceive me as gender-wise. I was no longer receiving any audition sides from the studio, and I thought that was a little strange. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, I'm still working, doing other things, which is fine. And I actually ended up having a sit down talk with the owner of the studio, and came to come to find out that while discussing this, they told me, we don't think that you can play straight characters. We don't think that you are right to play these characters now that we know that you're gay. And
they previously hired you on,
yep.
But now,
yep, correct. Yeah. Yeah. So since then, this long conversation we had about a year ago, I've worked with this studio since, but I still don't get to really get the same audition sides. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, okay, so that, I told them that how wrong that is in the year 2020, 2021 going forward. You can't not send an audition side, even when other, actors will say, hey, if they all get the same sides, hey, I got this audition for something. I'm not a good fit, but you'd be kind of perfect. Do you mind if I recommend you to the studio? And I had like 5 actors do that, and the studio still sent me nothing. And I brought that up to the studio, and they're just like, well, we just don't think that you can't sound straight, and the characters are not gay. So, and that is something that I've kind of noticed will happen when it comes to the dubbing Japanese anime, games, JRPGs, that sort of thing. I've noticed this has been a recurring thing with not just me, a few other people I know as well. Though the strange thing is, when it comes to commercials or AAA games, they don't care. I can go in and I did like Bug Snacks, and they're just like, oh, you're non-binary? Cool. We have like some non-binary like stuff in the script we wrote for you. And another game I did, they wrote the character with me in mind, and that was just like the coolest thing. They're just like, yeah, we're gonna incorporate it subtly but like respectfully. And I'm like, man, that is the coolest thing ever. And I go in and I work on the Elder Scrolls, and I talk to the team, and I'm working on that game, and I'm just like, when I worked on that, I was like talking to them, and they're just like, what kind of character do you play? I'm usually like a female elf, and they're just like, oh, female. I'm like, yeah. And they're just like, oh, that's so cool. And it's not just like, oh, you know what I mean? It's not just like, oh, that's weird, oh, we can't hire anymore. It was just like, oh, that's so cool, we'd love to know more about your play style and like tell us about it and stuff like that. And that to me was just like amazing. But it's a very different thing with certain studios and certain casting directors with just LGBT actors, actors that are not cishet. If you're not straight, then they won't even let you audition, which is BS, really. It's if you're vocally a fit, and I don't think I sound gay by any means. I know that like puberty did not hit me like a ton of bricks. It hit me like someone threw like a pebble at my leg, and I was like, quit it, and that was it. Like it was not just like, oh. So I still sound vocally, I look and sound vocally like I'm 15. That's just never gonna change, you know.
Which is a huge plus.
Yeah.
Which is a huge
You'd think, you'd think. I have the years of acting experience and training and dubbing and everything, and I'm just like, well, hey, I'm kind of like this kid in a time capsule, or he's stuck in a time loop here where I can't really age the way that some do. So I'd love to do this anime. And it's only now that some other studios are picking this up going, oh yeah, that's actually really cool. You know, your balls didn't really drop. That's cool. We can use you. And that makes me really happy to be like, finally, this is coming in handy. But it's just it really hurts when they're just like, well, yeah, you'd be a perfect fit. You know, it'd be cool to have you, but hey, you sound gay. Now that we know you're gay, I guess I just can't unhear it.
Can I ask you something, Casey, regarding, have you noticed any sort of patterns, or is it mostly studios with maybe like a Japanese staff, or have you noticed that like could it I'm just trying to figure out.
Some do have Japanese staff,
but not necessarily
not all of them,
right?
There's definitely not all of them, but I can think of 3 studios in my head, but one of them does have Japanese staff, and the other 2, as far as I know, do not. But I haven't had sit downs with the other studios yet because I just don't care, because I'm working enough with good people that you know, I just like whatever at this point, and I'm working with people that I enjoy working with, that understand and do not judge, criticize, and I don't want to have to be begging these sorts of people, please let me audition for this game. I don't care anymore. I'm at that point where I'm tired. You know, I'm just worn out from trying to think, what can I do? So, you know, as a result, you know, in this space, I can go by they, them. But when it comes to a lot of people that I meet for the first time, if I don't really know, especially if they run a studio that is dubbing, I'll just use he, him just to keep things safe. And I'll just be like, yeah, I'm straight. You know me, I love women. You know, and, you know, so far so good doing that, but it sucks to have to do that. And, you know, it's not something that I think, it's not a place I feel like we should be in, where your sexual orientation or gender identity will prevent you from not just getting the part, but given the opportunity to read, just to get the sides, you know, it prevents you from getting just the sides, because they have something in their head saying, nope, this doesn't work, this doesn't fit. And that's what sucks the most.
Yeah. I mean, I think I speak for myself, but I probably a lot of people who would like that. It's just appalling that happened to you, but also a lot of respect for you to actually confront them and speak up, because that's not an easy thing to do. But hopefully more conversations like this and putting more awareness out there, as we can change the landscape. Melly, do you have anything to share regarding your experience?
Yeah, I think as far as whether the industry is queer friendly, I think it's a yes and no answer. I think that fortunately the arts are very liberal, generally a very liberal, inclusive space, at least on the ground floor. So I have built, you know, as I've built a career for myself, I've been met with love and support, and in some cases, admiration or fascination with my range and what I can do. I think that there are still a lot of obstacles facing many queer actors, especially trans and non-binary folks, when it comes to finding a place in the work and being given a chance to spread our wings. I don't think coming out should be something that's necessary. I can feel like it is, it shouldn't be, but I can feel like it is necessary insofar as, okay. I felt like it was necessary, but when I look back, I'm not sure I can say that it made a huge difference. When I moved down here to pursue my career, I decided I came from a community of friends and family that all were there when I transitioned. So like I was inevitably out. And when I moved down here, I decided to start over, and I decided not to out myself because my hope was that I could build a career on the merits of my acting rather than my identity. And while slowly, I've had the opportunity to get my feet wet and to do some really cool, rewarding work, there's always been this sense that I was different. For every one teacher that marveled at my range, especially when I jumped into male presenting characters, at least, as far as gender norms are concerned, I would have 5 others tell me, usually positive, that I have a very interesting voice, but it would always land on some note of it's really hard to find roles for your voice. It's going to be really hard to find a fit. And so eventually I decided to come out more publicly. And one, because visibility is super important and encouraging, and especially to newer talent, to see that people are out there, that there's space for you as well, I think is valuable. But 2, I think because I felt that maybe having a framework for understanding why my voice worked the way it does might help some casting directors get over whatever their hang up was about me. I've had mixed results, honestly. It hasn't changed a whole lot other than possibly casting directors feeling safer sending me auditions for queer characters. One of the wildest things I've experienced is that because I had transitioned before I tried to step into the arts, a lot of people met me just as a woman. And fortunately, I seem to have the privilege of passing. But sometimes I worry that because they met me first as a woman, that it's been an incredible uphill battle to be able to play characters that fall within my assigned sex, which is an equal, if not larger, part of my range. So I read constantly for male characters, and I don't even get to do Walla or Bits most of the time. I've gotten to roar as a dragon once in a while, and fortunately Raleigh Pickens is amazing with Dragon Ball Super. He gave me almost exclusively male characters, but it's so weird to already live in this space where I would be led to believe that in a female range, I'm only capable of doing like 2 things that are bookable. But then to turn around and say, well, all right, let me start reading, in my normal range and start to try to audition for younger masculine characters and get told, it's kind of just a little feminine. It doesn't really fit that well. And I'm like, but that's my birth voice. Like, I'll grant you, there's been a lot of self-training involved. So I probably deliver in a slightly more feminine way than maybe I did a decade ago. But like, holy shit, that's just my voice. And so there's always going to be, this is the last thing I'll say on that. There's always going to be, we're kind of playing on hard mode as queer folks, and especially as trans folks. The show business is already stacked against everybody. But because we're fighting this uphill battle to be seen as valid vocal prints within the space, even if I rationally know that you're not going to book most of the things you read for, I can't not book a role without there being some part of me that asks, is it because you weren't feminine enough for the female characters? And is it because you weren't masculine enough for the male characters? Which, especially when like that was supposed to be my bread and butter that I maybe hid from a little bit at the first, when that isn't even booking, it's like, oh, well, just fuck me, I guess.
Yeah,
that escalated really quickly. I'm sorry.
I don't feel it escalated. Thank you for your sharing. Yeah.
Carrie, I wanted to ask you, while like you're a great advocate and very inclusive in your casting, what has been your experience in terms of either the studios or people that you've worked for, that when you cast, have you experienced any sort of pushback regarding who you want to cast or anything like that?
Actually, I have been incredibly supported in my advocacy. All the companies that I work for are really share that value, or at least allow me that value. Also, I tend to be, I've discovered recently that that I'm a bit of an anomaly. A lot of the other directors that I've spoken to, like they're not as involved in their casting, or have as much say in their casting, and yet I cast all of my own projects and I have a lot of say. And I think part of that is just people let me just sort of do my projects, and they, you know, like if they don't have to manage something, they're just like, we're going to go manage these other things and Carrie will just turn it in. But they've always, I mean, I do remember there was one, I did a Korean movie a couple of years ago, and I just like absolutely put my foot down. I was like, there's just no white people coming out of these spaces. Like there's just no white voices coming out of these spaces. Like I just won't do it. I just won't do it. And they were like, okay. And there's like one role that was like really, really hard to cast. It's an older guy, and it's like thicker sound and whatever. And they were like, what about this person? I was like, is he white? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, no. And we cast the role the day before my last day of recording, because I just refused. And I had the privilege of being able to do that because I already had a lot of trust with that company. And, you know, it didn't cost me anything to take that stance. Thank God, thank goodness, you know what I mean? Credit to them, and you know, grateful to me. But and also like when but the thing is, like, it surprises me so much, especially when it comes to queer representation, that like that I think it's really important to have people from that community voicing the people in that community, because it is a community that is misunderstood. It is a community that has a lot of like cliches, and a lot of like people are, you know, people who don't know, even if it's just like not out of like any sort of, you know, a deliberate ignorance. Like, you know, when I was casting Veneno, there was a lot of things I just didn't know about the trans community, you know, and I was terrified of making mistakes or saying the wrong thing or writing the wrong thing, and I made some mistakes, but I think Melly, even her first email to me was like, hey, I saw this thing, I just have a couple questions because blah, blah, blah. Because, you know, especially for trans women, they are very hypersexualized, not because they are sex fiends, but because society has failed them and pushed them out of being able to like have any regular jobs and be able to support themselves economically, historically. So therefore they were forced into sex work, and now things are changing, thank goodness. But like that cliche of, oh, trans women are hypersexualized and et cetera, but it was very challenging because in Veneno specifically, it was about a woman she was a real woman, and that really happened. So, you know, thank goodness Melly had, you know, the bravery, or like you know, she trusted me enough to like email me to say like, hey, I have some questions. Because in the thing I said, if you have questions, please let me know, please let me know, please let me know. And then I was like, I fully hear your questions. Other people have asked them, sign this NDA, and then I could tell you. And then I was able to tell her what it was. And then she was able to contextualize what was happening, and then be able to decide whether or not she wanted to read on it or be a part of it, you know? So there are definitely sometimes challenges in the casting process. If I can't give enough information, that like it might, and also I can't literally put on a breakdown like, I'm only casting queer people, you know what I mean? I'm like, if you happen to identify and you know, you happen to want to read, you know, so you're kind of always trying to find ways to like open up to that community and reach into that community. But if they don't know you and they don't know your heart and your sincerity, you know, like they don't have any reason to trust you. You know, like it's my bid to them, and they don't know. So trying to make yourself as like available as possible. So on one hand, with the companies, I'm like, I absolutely put my foot down. And I'm like, if this person, if it is a queer person in the story, if that is a part of their identity in the story, like it has to be voiced by someone. Because inside the sessions, they'll pick up on nuances of things that can be corrected. And I always tell them, if there's something that doesn't feel right to you, speak up, because we can rewrite it, we can rework it, we can redo it. And having them in the room and in the booth sharing their personal experience. First of all, the meaning that they give to things is so much richer. But secondly, having their experience and having them say like, we wouldn't talk that way. We wouldn't say that. That's not how we talk amongst ourselves, or that's not how I would say that to a younger person, or things like that. And then you go, okay, great. What would you say in this situation? And then we get to like adjust it. You know what I mean? So that way the representation that's going out there is more authentic, isn't isn't accidentally, continuing these stereotypes and these cliches and these like preconceived notions, and it also gives a more nuanced experience of, because like to say like the queer experience, like that's a huge group of people, you know what I mean? There's no like just Asian experience, that's a huge group of people, like it's not one experience. And so to be able to have people who have like personal meanings, and you can at least be like, well, that was their experience and that was real and true and valid and had meaning, and we can stand behind that, as opposed to me just being like, yeah, it's fine, that's cool, I'm sure that's real. But again, just to loop back, I kind of got sidetracked. But to loop back to your original question, I personally have really, but that's something I tell every company when I start off. I'm like, this is my stance on casting. This is how I feel about casting. This is what I do. And if you're going to ask something else of me, then you need to find another director, because I just won't do it.
Carrie, can I ask you a question, Carrie?
Yeah.
So that's so wonderful that you have that stance. How, if you can't directly ask the actor whether they are queer or not, how do you find them? I was just wondering.
Well, I might just happen to know people in life that I happen to know things about. And then, honestly, like I get around it by saying things like, hey, if you happen to be a voice actor in Los Angeles who identifies as LGBTQ plus and want to make me aware of you, that would be wonderful, especially if you voiced male presenting characters 30 to 40, and then I get Facebook messages and emails, and I get referrals and stuff like that, because people I've already worked with. And Casey's been really great about this too, is that like Casey will like co-sign me, and say like, no, Carrie, she's cool. Like, and Edward Hong, who has the BIPOC casting list, like he co-signs me all the time to say like, yeah, submit to her, because they know that I'm an active ally, and that I really, really want them to have their voice in the space. So it, it builds over time. And now because I have worked on so many projects with queer characters, even leading into Veneno, I now have a ton of people on my roster that are queer. But now now that I know them, I then can have them read on stuff that has nothing to do with their identity. Because having queer people portray queer people is like the duh, you know what I mean? That is like the baseline, that's the starting point. But what really changes things is then when like we really truly get to this idea of like, find the best person for the job. And so now you're having them read, and again, like it's just, and for any of the industry people out there, like I still am always learning. I'm still always nervous about like how I say something or how I present something. I always still ask questions. I still make mistakes. People are going to respond to things differently. I mean, I had some people who absolutely did not read on Veneno because it was just it was too hypersexualized for them, and they didn't want to be a part of that. When I put out the note about the one character who plays pre and post transition, I made sure to put that in there, because I know there are people that I know that their transition was not supported. And for them, unlike Melly, who is open to working in multiple, like, and Casey, both of them, I will work in both presenting genders. There are some people I know that like it's too soon, it's too fresh. They're not open to that. And I also want to make sure that people are taken care of in that way. Or if it's just like, I had a show where one of the characters it was a cartoon, but still they were being sent to like what are those camps where they try to like make you straight?
Conversion camp.
Yeah. There was a storyline that was with that, and the person that was originally slotted to play the character, like called and was like, I'm sorry, I can't. It was triggering them. So I was like, no problem, but like, if the F word is going to be used, in a scene, like I try to like make sure that information is out there for them so that people can make the decisions that they want. I've also started to adopt, I've seen other video game companies do this, and I started to adopt it my own sides, that I say like female or gender non-conforming, male or gender non-conforming, so that it is giving the actors the opportunity to decide for themselves what they want to represent. And I give them as much information as my NDA allows for them to make decisions that are right for them and feel good and proper for their mental health and for their artistic expression, so that they can make that balance. because it's I feel like their experience in the world is a much more exposed experience than mine. And so you want, like, I try to give them as much information as possible so everybody can make a decision that is like safe and comfortable for them. But then I also am like, hey, do you want to do bits that are male characters? Do you not want to? And then each actress that would come in would say like, oh yeah, I totally, no problem working in my male voice or working on that. And some of them were like, nah. And I was like, cool, no problem. So sometimes I think it is a little bit challenging. And I guess this is something I would love to hear like Casey and Melly's thoughts on, is that like when like how would you, like what tips or whatever would you give to people, like in terms of like how to approach you or how to reach out, or what feels like comfortable, like, you know what I mean, like how, like what would you, do you want, like how do you say like, yes, I read on male presenting, or no, I don't, or
this is it is a very new space for a lot of casting and production, and sometimes there's either ignorance or not comfortability. They don't know how to ask. I do want to hear Casey and Melly's stance, but just for the audience and anybody who may not know this, for casting, whenever we're talking about diversity or representation or inclusion, we do have to be careful, because we're not actually, casting is not allowed to exclude any actors, especially in the voiceover sphere. So that is why we're not allowed to actually, on a casting, and these are SAG rules too, the rules were created to prevent discrimination and racism, but now we've kind of come full circle, and the same rule can be applied as a barrier to representation, in terms of if we say we are only hiring queer actors, we can now be sued for being discriminatory against non-queer performers. Same with when it comes to race. So just be aware of that. Oftentimes casting will, try to use our own code to see that when we say encourage, right, we cannot flat out admit that we are not casting for, but if you are an actor not in that space, it may be something that you would consider turning down to give that opportunity to other performers in that space. But now circling back to in terms of how to ask these questions, one of the things that I have adopted is I have reached out to actors who I know are either trans or non-binary, and asking them, do you want me to send you both male and female auditions, or would you just like one or the other? I was just making notes for myself. But Casey and Melly, what is your preference in terms of if production or casting had questions for you?
Just like how you said, and I know you sent me that kind of email, and I said like, I voiced females and males. So for me, it's not a big issue. But it does come down to the actor. If a actor who is trans, let's just say hypothetically, male or female, transgender, and is now presenting as female, and you ask this actress if she wants to do even like a bit part, or like there's a role has a deeper kind of, it's a male character, would you be okay with that? And if she says no, I'm not comfortable with using that kind of part of my vocal range, it's just a bad thing for me all around, and I just want to avoid that altogether. That is absolutely valid, and and you'll have some actors as well that just go, oh, I could do either. It doesn't matter to me as much. And for me, like even though that I am born a boy, I still don't like sounding, I don't like pushing these down to try to sound super masculine if I don't have to. I'm actually pretty uncomfortable sounding deeper voice and really masculine voice, because it just doesn't fit me. I'm more on the androgynous side, and I always have been. It's how I've always kind of thought of myself since I was a little kid. So it's interesting that, like, I don't know, somehow puberty, my body worked in a weird way where it worked, force of will, I don't know, but it's like but for me though, I always was kind of like, I hate the sound of it, I hate the feel of it, I hate doing a deeper voice, it feels wrong, I hate it. And that's just me personally. I still will do it, and people will still hire me for these things. I never enjoy it, but I do it because it's part of my job and I want to show them that I can do it. So I bite the bullet as much as I can. But I know that for some actors, and I know if you personally, that there's absolutely no way that they would want to use a lower register. So
but
really
do you
comes down
feel
to
that
asking.
do you feel that they're like, especially like from like two things? I just want to jump in to get like just further clarification from you. So two things. One, a lot of times when I'm bringing someone in, I have to sign things in advance. Like I can't ask you in the moment. You know what I mean? I need to know in advance like what I can cover usually. Right. And also I feel sometimes a little bit uncomfortable asking someone in the moment, because I feel like even I say yes to things like in the moment just because I'm like, oh yeah, sure, because like nobody wants to be the asshole. You know what I mean? Like nobody wants to say no when they're standing in the booth, you
No one
know?
wants to mess up
And so
production.
yeah, exactly. So it's sort of like so then I'm in the position where like I have to ask via email. So like what does that email say? Like, hey Mally, you want to voice dudes? You know what I mean? Like do you know what I mean? Like what is what is the way that someone like what's the word you type? Like do you male presenting, male like, because also like we all know that we're like saying male and understanding male presenting and gender norms or clarification, like, you know, so we're not having to do all those clarifications with each other as a group here tonight because we know each other. But like if I don't know someone that well or they don't know me that well, like what does it sound like when someone asks respectfully to you?
When it's asked respectfully, it's like, well, it's always gonna, the perspective of that will change per actor, you might find, but
sure.
But I know for me, when people ask, I'm like, you know, if they come across as very like, and usually they do, where it's like, I understand you're, you know, middle presenting, you're non-binary, but knowing that, would you still be okay with doing female voices, or would you still be okay with doing say we have you doing some younger males like teen voice for a game, but we also have some utility we'd like to bring you in for example, and which is just like incidentals and background stuff. So some of them might be older men, like gruffer kind of men, and some might be women. Are you like, is that something that you would be comfortable with? If not, we can look elsewhere, but I wanted to let you know, to give you that opportunity in case you know would like to do those things. And I always just go, okay. I just go, okay, you know, since you asked that way too, it's just like, all right, yeah. And if it also makes a big difference who is asking to, if it's someone I know, like I know if it's you and you're just like, hey, I'm doing a thing. And I know and trust you, but you'd be like, hey, there's a thing. I'm gonna just put this in here just so you know, but just so you know, it's gonna be kind of like this. And I'll be like, yeah, okay. Because I know, you know, like, but it does depend on the actor, and it does depend on the person who's sending it out. But
well, is there there's a way?
Mally?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Is there a through line that you want to?
Oh no, I
just wanted to get
This is something I think about a lot. And I recently had an interesting conversation with a close friend, and this is a very close friend who cares about my emotional well-being, which is probably something that led to this conversation in the first place. Because I regularly, anyone that knows me knows that I stew over like how to land dudes as well. And so, you know, I might share a read or something that I've been working on the booth and say like, does that, like, I think that's just my voice. So like, is there any reason that doesn't sound masculine to you? Give me feedback. And this person said, I feel like that's an impossible question to ask me, because if I tell you, you know, I think it actually sounds feminine, but I think it sounds quite nice, then that's not what you're looking for, and that's going to upset you. But if I tell you, yeah, that sounds just like a dude, knowing that you're a trans woman, that could supremely offend you. And so I feel like that's a trap that you just laid for me. And the other uphill battle that I think a lot of us fight, especially as we're starting to build credits, is like, we don't have anything to show. And, you know, this is the demo, obviously, but you can only fit so much in a minute. So and especially when you're trying to encompass two genders, it's like, cool, I've got 6 to 8 character slots. Like, if I really pinball all over the place, am I just going to break someone's brain? Like, how do I manage that minute? Do I have 2 different demos? Is that weird? Is that lying? Do I submit with a pseudonym? And so I've been in a situation, for instance, when I put together a visual reel, I'm like, God, I want like one of my top 3 spots to be a young, passionate guy, and I still don't have one. I don't know what to do to find this. So now, especially since we've been doing more and more remote and we have people all over the country, and there's so much more opportunity, there's almost even more panic and desperation and not knowing what the right answer is. And so, you start asking yourself all these questions like, do I just start screaming it? Does that sound needy? If I start saying I want to play something in a public forum, is that a really bad look professionally? Does that start to see like I'm sniffing for work? And is that going to come off really unflattering to people in positions of casting? But otherwise, how do I manage that? I've had the most success when a director has reached out to me, and your mileage may vary, by them just asking me what kind of roles I feel comfortable playing. And I have something saved in my email box that addresses archetypes, both male, female, and other, that I feel I can strongly play. I will say that, I can play older, stronger, tougher, huskier, sultrier women, big sister character. I can play young, passionate, scrappy boys, often textured. I can play gremlins. I can play monsters. I can play everything in between. And I have that ready to go if someone asks me what my range is. But something I would add, especially to the people that are listening, who find themselves, dealing with this frequently. Pause for tea. Not everyone has to play everything. And sometimes I've spoken to many people who feel pressure that they have to be able to play both. Let's just for shorthand, because I know that it's a whole other conversation about what characters should sound like, but to be able to play both male and female, masculine and feminine characters. And you don't have to. If you're not comfortable with that, that's absolutely fine. But because there is often a very uneven power dynamic between the people in positions of casting and the people who are looking for work, we're already in a position where if we speak up too much about feeling overlooked or feeling like we might be the victims of prejudice or some kind of subconscious something, that, we're already freaking out about retaliation potentially. But then there's also that sense of like, well, if I'm not willing to do everything, like, am I cutting my chances of having a career in half? So there's just as much pressure on this side of it. And so just as kind of an addendum that sort of is like a yes and to everything I just said in the start, you play the archetypes that you're comfortable with, and that's absolutely fine. And I think that probably feeds into why I would prefer to be, personally, just me, your mileage may vary, I would prefer to just be asked what I can play. And I'm still going to have, monkey mind in the background going like, are they going to laugh when they read you tell them that you can play a masculine character? Like, are they going to roll their eyes at that? But like, that's my damage to work out.
It's interesting because I feel like when we come to in anime specifically and dubbing, there, just from a cultural standpoint, there are so many more roles that seem to live more in the non-binary space than in your traditional content. And I think that like the past few years, as society hopefully is becoming more aware of various groups and of various forms of oppression in all of our systems, that things are changing. But I know, as being a POC myself, that it's a double-edged sword. Like, it is both can be both opening opportunities and also closing doors by limiting only to that specific group. What has your guys' experience been? Have you found it to be more opening of doors, or do you feel like it is more limiting? James, do you want to start, since you haven't spoken in a while?
Maybe this applies to the LGBTQ sphere, but I guess I'm going to approach it from the person of color area, in that, like Melly said, you don't have to play everything, and very often you are not going to play everything. That they're going to see you. Oh, I like that voice. He can do this, this, and this. For me, I got my start, decades ago doing Jackie Chan adventures, right? So it was a very specific Asian role. They wanted to cast an Asian person. And at first I felt like, oh, I'm being marginalized, I'm being ghettoized into this little sphere. But I think I've come to believe personally that voiceover is a really, really hard job to get into. There, you know what I mean? It's a really small group of people. And if I can find my niche, excel in it, then I can work out from there. Like, so I do a lot of Asian roles, some roles with accents, some roles are just Asian and they want to cast an Asian person. But from there, I can branch out. I mean, I can play lots of animals. I can play monkeys, pandas. And so I guess I'm glad that I have my sphere, but I'm always trying to push out from there to get roles that are not specifically Asian. And I think that comes over time with casting directors feeling comfortable with you and seeing when you're doing a smaller role, you're doing a little bit role here and there, that, oh, they can do this. And then they add on the, oh, this and this. So I used to think it was ghettoization, but now I just feel like I have my corner and I'm building from there.
That's a very positive take on that. No, I like it. Casey, do you have thoughts on how you view?
That's a pretty good way to cover it. I mean, I'm not really sure I have anything super helpful to add there, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like kind of like what he was talking about, like putting you in that box is it's something that you just find yourself in when you are who you are, I guess. And that's the kind of a scary thing for someone who is not always wanting to be in that box, as from an LGBT actor standpoint. And I feel like sometimes I could be missing out on some opportunities because people might know that I'm gay or non-binary or whatever, and is, though I'm okay with receiving auditions that are like, oh, this is an LGBT character, this is a non-binary character, which is great, but it also starts to kind of suck because you never get sent young males, which is, there's a lot more young male auditions than random non-binary characters. And I liked it a lot more when I was auditioning for, younger boy roles and booking those. And once those auditions stop coming in, I get the occasional non-binary alien or robot, rarely a human. And if it is something like that, they don't tell you anything else about the character, how they want the character to sound. It just says gender non-binary, and it does not, non-binary first off has no sound. So there are people I know, several people, all actors, that identify as non-binary, like myself. I am an androgynous sound. I am in the middle. I can play either, but some of my friends that are also non-binary are not. They will sound more masculine or more on the feminine side. and they're okay with that, but that's just how they are. It's not about their vocal presentation, it's about their identity. So the strange thing is when we get these auditions, and you know, it's just interesting when you get some things and you're like, this character's name is I don't know, let's just say Sarah, and this character's non-binary, age 6, is into dolls, and I'm like, you at this point just want me to voice a little girl, and you're just putting that there, you know what I mean? And it's the same kind of thing where it's like, well, I'm not gonna audition for that. And sometimes my agent will send stuff like that to me, and I have to explain, I can't, this is not vocally a fit. And that becomes frustrating because then you have to explain to even your agencies that this is a box that you put me in that I humbly request you do not, and they still do. So it's very frustrating sometimes. Sorry to go off on that like kind of tangent, but like what about like what James said kind of like about that box is you know, you can kind of corner that type of character, which is great, own it, but it shouldn't be something that you're reduced to doing alone. You should still be able to at least audition for things if you are comfortable with that. And you know, I am, and I'm sure many others are too. It just sucks that we don't always are given that opportunity, because in their minds sometimes they think they're doing us a favor. Well, we're sending you non-binary, what more do you want? Well, I don't know if you know this, but 98% of my work is voicing young boys and maybe older women. And they go, oh, so you want to audition for those? I go, yes, please. I don't want to lose all my opportunities, because when that one non-binary character comes but once every 4 months, and I might not even be that right vocal fit, that's not a way to make a living. That's just it's stupid, really, and it's hardcore limiting, and it is not a way to proceed, to progress in this field. And you know, you can be very multi-talented and just have a very big range and voice a lot of things, but sometimes they don't really care about that, because they either don't care about it because they see you as, oh, you're just the token gay, so we'll call you up when there's a token gay character or a token non-binary, or they just don't know where to put you. If you can voice, it's funny giving directors whiplash when they don't know. You go in, voice a boy, then you voice a man, then you voice some like younger girl, and then you voice some older lady, and then you do a bunch of creature stuff, and they're just like, what the hell was that? And I'm like, I don't know, that's 15 years of me having no life and voice acting, and just learning. And that's all that is, really. But then they don't know where the hell to put you. So they're just like, well, I don't know what to send you. And they never really say that. They just kind of bring you in less and less.
They should send you everything then, right?
I know, like, I mean, I'm hearing that
like
story,
that's
and
the
first of all,
solution
yeah,
is send
first
you
of all, my
everything
heart
then,
goes
right?
out, yeah. First of all,
Yeah.
my heart goes out to you, and I'm like, and I hate that they're not reading you on young boys, because I feel like you've done so many young boys for me that I'm like, you've fucking graded them.
Yeah.
I just swore, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, because I feel like when I meet someone who is like that, you know, whether they're, you know, trans or queer or straight or whatever, if like you have a ton of voices inside of you, like I just want you to do all of them for me. I want you on everything. I'll just be like, I don't know, throw everything at them and see what happens. Like it seems like a strange response to a very rich and nourishing resource that you could have for your project.
I believe so too. Just not everybody sees it that way.
Somebody had posted on the Q&A, like, what can fans do to support queer performers? And it just occurred to me, like, this is like one way. It's like, you know, get on your social media and just
rabid
and talk about how much you love a specific performer in a specific role. For example, if you love Casey in a like a young male hero voice, you know, to just blast that out so that those performers are not pigeonholed in a way, you know, based on however these boxes that certain casting people are putting them. I know that I know Zeno and Bill Butts does, whenever there's a Black voice actor voicing a non-Black role, they're like, hey, you know, it's like same idea.
Mhm.
I think that is one way that that fans can help. But I didn't want to leave out Melly if you had anything to add in terms of this discussion.
So I grew up, I studied theater first and foremost. I thought I was going to do on camera. I hated that when I got to college, and, you know, maybe I'll rediscover it at some point, but there was a lot of dysphoria happening at the time too. So it's hard to kind of untangle where all of that happened, but, you know, got my BFA in drama. And then at some point I discovered, you know, voiceover for anime, and I started taking workshops, and I would, at the time I hadn't transitioned yet. So I would pick up I've said this before, but like every young, passionate guy I could get my hands on. You know, I was picking up your Ed Elrics and your Simones and characters like that. And I tended to get great feedback on my work to some extent. Workshops are always a little bit bias positive, but still. And there was a moment in my life where I was grappling with this need to transition, where I was terrified that if I was working tech, so like I wasn't even focusing on an acting career, but there was still that part of me that needed to be telling stories. And I think I knew that. And I was terrified that if I transitioned, that I was throwing all hope of being part of this world in the garbage. And it's interesting because some people, you know, come from theatrical backgrounds and have a lot of training, and other people start as a fan and want to get involved and then study acting and take it from there. You know, like there are different routes into this industry. I think about sometimes, you know, because I've had those experiences, I always feel like I'm fighting to get something back that I've lost, you know, to reclaim something. And so when I'm at my worst, I have that thought of, if I had never transitioned, would I be getting more opportunities than I am? Other times when I think about the fact that this is still my voice, I wonder, well, would I still be down here screaming that no one takes me seriously? You know, and I'm oversimplifying because I've had a career and I have a career and I will continue to have a career. But I, you know, I wonder, maybe it wouldn't have mattered. Who the hell knows? But, and, you know, I said earlier, I also have that worry that because I came into the industry stealth and people met me as a woman first, that maybe that would explain why I rarely, if ever, get given the opportunity to play male roles. And I wonder if, because I have more of an androgynous or a gender nonconforming sound, that when I do go for those tough Satsuki Kiryuin style characters that I feel like should be right in my wheelhouse, that, you know, if it goes to someone else, there's always that little voice saying, is it because you didn't have that extra little bit of genuine femininity? You know, is that the thing that tipped the scales? And, you know, it's not productive or emotionally satisfying to go down that well, because I know that not transitioning was never an option. I had to be me, you know? I'm not sure if I know the answer to that pressure yet, whether, you know, out of passion or out of anger and resentment. I always feel like I'm fighting to prove people wrong with the work that I do. And I try to do the best work I can so that maybe I can change some of those minds. But to a point that that James made, and I guess I'll leave it here, there is kind of a cult of, no disrespect at all to Carrie and Stephanie, but there's kind of a cult of director knows best in the industry. And so, especially when you're talking to people who don't have all those extra layers of kind of the marginalized experience on top of their career, you'll often get well-meaning advice that, you know, well, if this is the kind of roles you're booking, if you're generally booking mom or, you know, old woman in the store or whatever, that, you know, the director knows what they want. The director knows what they're looking for, and they have a good idea of what you can do. They're smart, capable people. And I've always had kind of a yes and to that, especially because of everything Casey's spoken about how limiting the opportunities feel sometimes, and how often we don't get a chance to read in the first place, and how often it feels like directors may not be giving themselves an opportunity to be surprised and to re-envision a character they thought that they heard in their head already.
Right. Yep.
That yes, I know that the director knows what they're doing and they're a professional and they have a sound and they have an idea and maybe this is a great fit for me. But I just am not convinced that they know me well enough, that they know the work I do well enough, that their barometer is running on full cylinders, that they have the framework to fully know what I can bring to actually close the book on where I fit the best.
Just want to, just a little sidebar. It's not really about dubbing, but when I'm listening to Casey, when I'm listening to Melly, your voices are so, they're so, how can I describe this? They're interesting, they're textured, they're so flexible. And this won't help in the dubbing field, but recently I'd written a novel called All Kinds of Other, and it involves a relationship between two queer boys, one who is cisgendered and one who's transgendered. And in doing the audiobook, I kind of opened into this world of audiobooks, and especially for, say, a lot of queer YA books, they are really looking to find people who are representative of the subject matter of the book. And especially if you're feeling limited, like they're not giving me everything, in a book, you're reading everybody, you know? You're reading the mom, you're reading the kid, you're reading all sorts of characters. And I do think that they're trying to make a concerted effort to find people who are suited for the subject matter of the book. And there are, I know personally from the YA sphere, there are a lot of queer books coming out, have come out, are coming out, a lot of trans, non-binary characters. And so Penguin Random House has a site called Ahab, which you can, for free, you put on your samples, you put on what you're comfortable doing, any salient information. And so maybe, I mean, it doesn't pay very well, but when I did it, because I did half of the book, it gives you such a sense of artistic control and artistic expansion because you're playing so many characters. You're really driving the ship. So if you're feeling really hampered by maybe the dubbing world, maybe audiobooks is another venue to just explore. I'm just going to leave it there. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Carrie.
I just wanted to say two comments as I'm hearing from all of you. One, I think the challenge inside of this career in general for any human is that the feedback loop there is almost non-existent, right? You do an audition and you send it out to the world, and then it's like you either hear yes or you hear nothing. And so I try, for me, and again, this is like I know part of this conversation is about for like industry people as well, to both hear your experiences and then from my perspective, ways that I sort of handle things. If these are helpful tools for other casting directors or people, that I tend to, especially when I am reaching into a new community of people, when they make the short list and they go to producers, but they don't end up booking it, I like to reach back and email them. I did this on my last project. I emailed all of them, everyone who made the short list. I emailed them to say, thank you so much for your time, attention, energy, and your creativity. We ultimately went with someone else, but just so you know, you made our short list. So you went to producers for this. And because of that, you're going to be held in the database at the company to be available for casting for future roles. And I just wanted to let you know that you really did a great job, because the feedback loop on this in this industry sucks, because it's yes or nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that reality gives each of us, and I'm an actor too, I do it, I know better. I'm on all sides of this and I still do it as an actor. I know better and I do it. We all can tell a story. We can all start telling a story about what's going on and what's going on and what's going on. And so sometimes there are real things that are happening, and sometimes we're just beating ourselves up. And we just have to find ways to try and be as compassionate with ourselves. And like Melly said, like, it's a tough industry. Like, we all know this is a tough industry. It's very competitive. So, and that feedback loop, it just is non-existent. And that sucks for us. And so that's something that is something I've adopted over the last year, is that I try to reach out to people who make the shortlist just to let them know, just to try and give a little bit more of that feedback loop. And it usually seems, the actors usually seem very appreciative to get that. I can't email everyone that auditioned, you know what I mean? And there's some people who don't, and sometimes you don't make the shortlist, not because you didn't give a good audition, but it just wasn't right for how it fit in with everything. There's a lot of things that go into casting. So we also, though I'm not trying to deny anyone's reality, obviously there are real barriers that are happening inside this community. However, I'm just, as individual people, to take care of yourselves and your own sense of self while you're experiencing and expressing your artistry in the world, to just keep in mind that you can be making people shortlist. I listen to these auditions and I love listening to auditions, and everyone does such a great job. And specifically in dubbing, so much of it in live action has to do with do you come out of that face? Do you come out of that jawline? You know what I mean? And that's not, you can't do anything about that, no matter what your identity is. Like, I have a tiny jaw, and that's just never going to change. So there are some things. So I just want to, if that's at all any bit of comfort to anyone out there. The second thing is that I'm going to be very, very honest and very transparent about my own unconscious bias, and having to grow over the years, and knowing that what's been amazing for me is what James said was being able to work on shows that I was no, this is a Korean show and it's just only Asian people, or these are the African-American roles and that's all it's going to, or there's a queer role and that's all it's going to, these are trans women and that's all it's going to, has given me the opportunity to reach into these communities and really, really focus on learning about being introduced to talent that populates those communities. And then once you know them, then it is my responsibility to actively remind myself every time I am making my lists, to stop and go, okay, now list out 10 Asian men. Now list out 10 Black men. Now list out 10 trans men, and make sure they get the auditions. But that's something that even I have to still remind myself to do, because it is so easy. It is so easy as a white straight woman to see a white person and just automatically, or just because the number of people, just by historically, the percentage of people that you're going to get that are going to be white and straight in your audition pool it's just going to be a bigger percentage. And so, but it's something I have to consciously remember to focus on. And I'm really proud of, I get really proud of myself that my last show had 12 leads and they were all white, and 4 of them were people of color. You know what I mean? You can't tell that they're not white people. They sound right for the faces, they sound right for the articulation, they sound right for the jaw, and then now that I work with all these trans women, now where can I put them in other projects and other roles that don't have anything to do with that identity? But it is still something you have to do consciously. And I think that, we all want to imagine ourselves as being these really great, wonderful, perfect, lovely, good, moral people, so, and that need to feel like I'm a good person can sometimes be in the way of me being open and fair and inclusive. And you have to do your best to be vulnerable, keep yourself accountable, and really put in that work until it becomes second nature. And then now your regular group of people that you go to, because it's not just only the leads get auditioned. What about all the other roles you're casting in a project? And if your subconscious bias is just the people you've worked with, and just because you've worked on a lot of projects that are full of white people, then all of a sudden, you're not. And then if you're not impacting these communities, if you're not impacting the marginalized communities economically, if you're not giving them the economic benefits of working and paying into their pension and health, then you should consider doing more, because I think we need to focus on that. And there are always going to be plenty of roles for white people. Nobody's losing anything in this dynamic. And I know that that's something that people can get kind of caught up with. So that's just what I want to say.
James, I really appreciate the advice and the ideas. It means a lot to put additional options on the table. I resist, and maybe I'm naive, but I resist. I push back against the idea that, because I've been told it enough, and I'm a Capricorn, I guess I've gotten stubborn, that there are certain types of voices that just don't fit as well in this medium. This is an and, this is not a but. And so I want, when I hear, your voice isn't an easy fit for anime, I think, well, okay, but certainly there are voices that we consider iconic that are instantly recognizable that at some point in time, I hope, maybe I'm full of shit, had similar experiences. At some point in time, did Todd Haberkorn or Steve Bloom or Claudia Black get in the room with someone and have them say, you have a really interesting sound, I'm not quite sure what to do with it. And now they're ubiquitous. So when I hear that, as someone in the chat pointed out, I always think to myself, well, it's about exposure. If you hear our voices enough, you're going to get used to how we sound. You're going to start to imagine us playing roles that you might not have imagined us playing yesterday. I want to see studios be braver and try when they can to resist the archetypes, the sounds that we've decided are standard in at least the anime dubbing world. And I want to, as someone who's not in production, I want to see studios or hear about studios pushing back against the client that doesn't want them to go in that direction. I'm going to get into fantasy world for a second. I want every studio to be doing that. So the idea of, well, we'll give your license to some other studio doesn't work anymore because there isn't another studio to give it to. And eventually we have some leeway to be able to ask questions in advance about character journeys so that a trans character isn't a 7th episode coming out so that it's impossible to cast representatively because we won't know for 6 weeks. I want to see, and I want to see characters that I want to expand what characters that we see are allowed to sound like. I want the character who's the big muscly one to have to be able to sound a number of different ways. The one with the glasses needs to be able to sound a number of different ways. The muscly girl needs to sound a number of different ways. But that also means that where those opportunities exist, directors need to let us read for the roles in the first place. And there have been shows that have gone to air that have had fantastic diversity and have created some incredible opportunities. But when you're on the inside, whether or not those were widely auditioning shows. And so sometimes you can end up in a tough place where you're like, man, everyone is celebrating such and such because it has, outwardly has such a diverse cast. But, I know a number of people who are marginalized voices who apparently no one gave a crap about hearing them read for it, even give you an opportunity to try. And I said earlier, the second part of that is you need to let us read in the first place. And oftentimes that's where I would put the period. But I think the second part is also that you need to be willing to let yourself be surprised. I said this earlier, let yourself be surprised and not be locked into a specific sound. I would very much like to believe that we have room to grow in the anime medium and that it's not simply a place that you either fit or you don't fit.
Right.
I totally agree with what you're saying. And I do think what you bring up, Melly, is challenging specifically to anime. Mostly because that there still is this trend that it's somewhat of that they want some kind of voice match, that the client wants some kind of voice match. And so one of the things on the production end that in terms of challenging these like vocal codes, of what that's like vocal stereotypes of what certain images look like, should sound like, is also fighting back a client that has another set of cultural norms. I will say though, that's the depressing negative aspect of it, but I think the positive aspect of it is that the world is constantly changing, and that if studios are brave enough to speak up, I think they will find and push back. If it doesn't have to be pushed back really hard, or even just ask the question, they may actually be surprised to see that even the Japanese are willing to change certain things or change their ideas. I actually on one of the Gundams, there was just a character where the skin was darker, and in typical anime fashion, that character they drew him with really big lips. and I just mentioned it offhand. He had dreadlocks, really big lips, and he very tan character. And I mentioned it to the producer offhand. I was like, you know, this is kind of like very stereotypical, this drawing, right? And the producer went to the animation team and they made changes to the art, which I was completely shocked by. You know, I didn't think would ever happen. So I'm just saying that there is hope. And I hope that anybody watching this who is in the production sphere, just because it's anime and just because there is a Japanese client, like, don't be afraid to speak up about something and challenge norms. And everybody in terms of social media, you know, if you see something that is not right, talk about it online, because sometimes social pressure doesn't do anything, but sometimes you'd be surprised. It may change the world. We are running so behind because I was supposed to take questions that you guys have been putting in the Q&A, and there's tons of questions like at 7:30, but of course everyone on this panel had so much wonderful things to contribute. I'm just going to go, and I apologize, we'll probably not get to many of them, but I'm just going to go through and ask a few of these. Let's see. Oh, so this is an interesting one, since we're talking about casting directors and screwing up, and say, like, any tips or any common pitfalls that you have seen from casting or production when they say something that has just been totally inappropriate. It may be ignorance or accident, you know, potentially harmful. One, if as a performer, you know, that you receive this email, what is your advice, the best way to correct them or push back? And then in terms of for casting and production people, what are the big no-nos that you've seen that maybe they casting or production is just unaware, and they write something totally unintentionally offensive?
This is your chance right now to tell everybody how they're supposed to do stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if anything comes directly to mind. I feel like the Jeopardy music is like playing in the background in my head. Do you guys hear it too?
Anyone that knows me knows that I just roll with so many punches. You give me a platform and I'll talk your ear off for an hour, but like I don't care, and I know a lot of people that do. So I'd love to hear what everyone else has to say on this.
How have you, in Casey or James, in your experience, if you've ever had to gently correct casting, how have you handled that approach, or have you just not, you know, because it is taking risk?
I guess for me, okay, for example, I think there is, for me, the greatest power I have, I've been thinking, is to say no. There's a certain Fox show that I've auditioned for, and some of the script is so incredibly racist to me. Maybe other people find it funny, but I just find it incredibly damaging. And so I will just tell my agent, no, please do not send me these things. I will not read for them. So I don't know, maybe I could be more proactive, but for me it's just saying no.
Do you explain to your agent why, or you just leave it at that?
No, I said, look at this. This is horrible. I can't believe this is being written in this day and age. And no, there's no way I'm going to do this. So, and they understand. My agent is very good about, fine, we'll just take you off. So.
Yeah, I mean, little bits of personal activism, sure. I haven't had the opportunity to be on a show where I could say no and see what happens. But I've certainly gotten auditions where, like, they've clearly tried to make it sound like a trans character, but it really is kind of a drag queen performance that they're looking for. And so, you know, maybe it says something, but who knows? I'll give an honest performance. And I might give a masculine read and I might give a feminine read, but they'll be honest, grounded reads, and they can choose not to cast me.
And I mean, I've had auditions too where after having explained to my agency, I still get sent stuff. One of them was a lead character in a video game that's supposed to be a transgender woman. And I said, I can read for this. However, can I put forward a couple of friends of mine who are trans women actors, actresses, and can I put them in front of you to read? And they said, well, what's the problem? You're gay, you're non-binary. It's like the same thing, right? And I'm like, okay. So I had to make a phone call, and long story short, I don't think they quite understood. I did do a callback, and I told the people while I was doing the callback, because they did not relay the message that this was not. So I had to say, just for the record, I'm non-binary, just putting that out there so there's no oops, we cast someone who's not appropriate. Thankfully I didn't book it because I was really terrified of booking it and being like, this is not a role for me. You know what I mean? You just know. This character is not my story to tell. This is not, you know what I mean? So I just felt weird about that. And, I've been approached sometimes with scripts for other things too, where, here's a LGBT character. Okay, well, what happens in it? Oh, well, he gets beaten up and then takes his own life. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I want to do that. No, wait, hold on. Let me tell you more about it. And it's like, oh yeah, they also call you slurs and stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, you know what? If this is the one time you're going to reach out to me, like this one time the studio is going to reach out to me for something like this, bye. I work on other things from, with great people that would not even think to send me something like this, that consider me for other things that are not shockingly awful. The one time some people come to me is pretty much that. We need some validation. We got an LGBT character, gets picked on, gets killed, or they kill themselves, or them being LGBT is a negative point in the story. And I'm just like, no, I'm sorry, but no. I just say no, just like James. I started to just say no, because what the hell am I going to say when that comes out? Hey, I'm proud to announce, hey guys, I'm really ashamed to announce that I voiced this character in a, I can't do it.
That's a very
Just
good
as a small
point.
anecdote kind of related to that is there was apparently when I was doing Veneno, there was apparently a project going around. There was some kind of indie film or something where there was a trans woman character, and the director it was not a great role, and the director was not that sensitive, and in the scene, for like no real reason, they like dropped the N-word or whatever, like all of a sudden on the spot, like it wasn't in the script, and they were trying to get them to do it like on the day. And though I heard the story from one woman who came in who was like, no, I'm not going to do that, and like left set. And then a week later, one of my other actresses came in and told me the exact same story, because she had been the replacement for the first actress, and she also walked off the set, said no, and walked off the set. So there is like James said, there is power in saying no. There is, and I know it feels terrifying, and I know sometimes you're like, oh, I'm not in a place with my career, I'm going to get blacklisted, da, da, da. But listen, I'm just going to tell you this right now. The people who are mean-spirited enough to like blacklist you and like decide they're going to put forward the energy of like actively remembering to hate you for the next 30 years are not people you want a relationship working with anyway. Like, yes, maybe you have a little like with two people, and then like they get a chance to like grow as a person, and then like 2 years from now you guys like whatever, and then you work together a lot for the next 10 years or whatever. Like you can have little like relationships can fall into disrepair and then go back into repair. It's natural inside of our lives and our working lives and our human lives or whatever. But those people who like are going to take your no and like punish you for it, whether they're an agent or a studio or a director or something, like they are not the people you want to be working with, and they're not the majority. There are plenty of people who are good they're not going to do that. that are not going to be full of spite. You're going to run into them. You are going to run into the people who are full of spite, but there's no changing them. So if your no doesn't help that situation, then whatever, but like your no has power, use it when you need to use it, and it will make a difference.
One other really quick one, and this is a little bit of a lower impact one, but especially because we've recently seen a couple of shows hit that have had trans characters. It's worth mentioning that this is still a sticking point that I see that happens, where more than once I've seen an American production still feel beholden to the sound of the original character. And oftentimes when we see, especially a trans woman in an anime, it's being voiced by a cis actor. And so you've created an impossible bar to reach for many, you know, at least male to female transitioned people. And I've spoken to fellow trans actors who've told me stories of scraping the highest part of their register to try to play this character because they're trying to match the original actor, only to be told in a callback, can you go any higher? Can you go any higher? And it was so demoralizing. And that's a place that I've seen that we should allow ourselves to localize and to allow ourselves to place casting representatively as a higher priority than voice matching the cis-washed role coming out of the original production. And one of the places that we see sort of weird, uncomfortable compromises happen is that, you know, it hasn't happened much. I don't have a giant list of trans characters that have shown up in anime, but you know, sometimes you'll see where they'll cast an actor who ends up playing their assigned sex. So you might see, and mileage may vary with regard to how much we like these terms, but you might see someone who has an assigned female non-binary or assigned female trans guy or something like that who ends up playing a trans woman because maybe they haven't transitioned or they are not interested in transitioning. Their voice lives in a register that can pass as cis female. And so even though you end up with LGBT representation in terms of casting, you have accidentally cis-washed the character.
I would also add that, like, when we worked on Tokyo Godfathers, you know, in casting that process, you know, it was also really important. It was kind of like also a learning process that just trans male and trans female, it's not the same experience. And like, luckily we had a client, G Kids, who was very sensitive and wanted to do things right and wanted to get a performer who could really relate to the experience of the character. And it was exactly, Melly, we did have to fight back because in the Japanese, it was a cis male voicing that role. And so when we were presenting options, that was a fight. And luckily the client was, you know, fought and pushed back so that we were able to cast appropriately for that project. So yes, definitely. I completely agree. There is, I don't even know how long this is going to, but there is a question here that has little stars around it and it's very long. So I'm just going to read it. All right, here we go. Okay. So it's a discussion that often comes up on panels discussing POC issues in anime specifically because there's so much crossover between actors and production, is how recent strides to push diverse casting can often only hit the bottom rung of creating long-term change because production is so largely white. I think what it's saying is that any diversity things that are happening now in casting is like a trend because production staff is largely white. I'm rephrasing. I'm curious if you could speak about that in this context and creating more opportunities for queer actors in anime, many of whom I've heard this exact point from in the behind the scenes, whether it be directing, scripting, casting, to start also to create that change from the inside and not just top down. So I guess what they're saying is that in anime production, a lot of this production staff is cisgender. And so because of that, because of an intentional or unintentional bias, that maybe this push for representation is short-lived because of that. How do we change that? And how do we get more representation on production side for anime and dubbing or VO in
Oh
general?
yeah, get involved. I've just recently, it's not been announced yet, so keep your mouths shut. I won't name anything, but I just started doing ADR script writing. I want to direct. I didn't want to when I moved down here. I just wanted to be behind a microphone telling stories. But I think the more you see what could be and the more you see what's missing, the more you want to get involved. And so I have felt a fire building up inside me to get in the director's chair so that I can start to help create that change. Because the last thing any of us wants to feel like is that we are sitting around waiting for somebody to die and then, you know, rolling the dice and hoping the next person that gets the chair is less of an asshole. So the way that we fix that is as much as we can from the ground up. Like the grassroots pressure is one thing, but I think more of us need to and want to get in that seat and start to play a part of production so that we can be the people making some of those decisions. Hell, and you know what, to that end, I'll say this, I've written more than one studio when I've seen representative things that have worried me to say, you know, hey, I'll read for this character that seems problematic, but I want to talk to you about it. And even if I'm not in the cast at all, like here's my phone number, whether or not you choose to take me up on it, like, let me be a resource to you because I am invested, you know, for the sake of the non-existent monolith, like I'm invested in seeing you guys get this right. So let me help if I can help.
It's great that you do that. I'm curious what has been the response generally when you do reach out and offer that assistance?
There have been 2 times so far, and it's been hit and miss. I think both studios have responded with sensitivity. One told me how important, you know, visibility was, and they told me they see me, which I'm bored of hearing. And then they did whatever they did, and I think for the most part they handled it with care. But one of the studios brought me in to talk to them, and we had a long conversation and we watched the episodes and we went over the script together and I sent them ideas and they let me review the script before they brought any actors into the booth. And that was freaking incredible. Wow. that they took it seriously enough to actually let me consult with them as someone who was otherwise not a part of the production at all.
That's fantastic.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Melly. I just feel like in this tonight in this discussion, you know, you've openly said that you're very outspoken and you speak your mind but it seems like from what I'm gathering that most of those situations have yielded a positive result. Would you say yay or nay? I'm just hoping that, like, if that is true, that's inspiration for other people who may be a bit shyer or less brave or more concerned. I don't know.
See, you know, I write a lot of notes, which means half the time like a voice actor, I'm working from a script, and I don't have one for this one. But I don't know, dude. I'm terrified when I do that. Writing some of those emails have been some of the scariest, most anxiety, most reflux-inducing things I've ever done because we're always terrified of retaliation. You know, hell, my joke about this panel has been like, come see me build and/or burn bridges over the course of 2 hours. I think that it depends. People are going to yield if they want to, and you only have so much control over that. You can only change minds so much, but if you don't take a swing, then nothing will happen. So yeah, I would say that on some level I've seen positive results. And I think that us being here is proof of concept that there is space for you too to be a part of this world, even if you see us elbowing and screaming the whole time. But there, you know, but all the anxiety and all the fear is there that we're still just trying to build a career for ourselves and not step on too many toes. And so there is constantly a tug of war where it feels like we might not even get a shot if we're not squeaky enough, but if we're too squeaky, no one's going to want to touch us.
Speaking of elbowing and screaming, this is a very timely panel because tomorrow the union, the SAG-AFTRA dubbing committee is holding a town forum to discuss issues coming up with the next contract. So if any of you are union and you want to RSVP to the union, you can definitely get your issues at least heard. So that's happening tomorrow. I'm not quite sure when, maybe 6 or 5:30, somewhere around there.
And I guess the
believe
last
it's
thing I'll say, by the
5:30.
way, not to shove that aside, because I think we should get links to that in chat and see if we can get people involved, at least to listen. But you know, it also depends on the context, I guess, is the last thing that I would say, you know, because me being loud and expressing interest has gotten me to shadow a director once or twice, and it's gotten me writing a show. But no one feels comfortable going to a director and say, this is why you should cast me. You know, so there's a, you know, certain theaters you see better success than others.
Well, I will say that, I mean, like, you emailed me and you were like, Carrie, listen, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I have a problem with X, Y, and Z. And I was like, no, please, I thank you for mentioning it. And so, I mean, I really appreciated that, you know, and I ended up casting you.
There's
But I also feel like, I also feel like it's not a situation where, once again, we're putting the responsibility and weight and all the, like, the work on you to, like, have to educate and, like, you're like, why do you have to carry all the load? Why do you have to do all the emotional labor? You know what I mean? That's, like, not, it shouldn't be your responsibility to do all that. And then I also want to say that but one positive thing to tag on to what Melly was saying is that, you know, there is so much, especially specifically dubbing, because this is a dubbing a panel, there's so much more of that now as more and more streamers are getting involved in this, that, like, there are so many more opportunities opening up from different studios in production, you know, to be like dubbing producers or supervisors or stuff like that. So even if you're not in the arts and you're not a performer, but you want to be able to be a part of this conversation or have an influence or just be in the room to like, you know, I love that I'm in the room to be like, that person should be gay, like, or, you know, but just to be able to be a voice in the room, again, not putting you in a position of emotional labor, but just like, there are a lot of studios that are building out their staff because there is so much more of this work happening. So, you know, like, that is a great way for someone who's maybe not an artist who wants to be a part of this conversation and really make that difference, you know, from the top down, is like really working at these companies so that you are in on those conversations when those decisions are being made or when those auditions are being sent out, or and also as another casting person, you know, for me, I feel like it only takes me, what, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60 seconds maybe to know if, like, a voice is right or valid for a script, or like the acting is good, et cetera, et cetera. So I have no problem sending the side out. It takes the actor more time to do the side than it takes me to, like, review the side, depending on how long it is, you know? So, like, there's really no harm in sending it out and, like, seeing what comes back and, like, being surprised. And if you get, and the problem with casting is that you try to put together a palette that all works together and lives in the same sonic world, right? And if you only send it to, like, 3 trans actors or 3 queer actors, and then suddenly, like, they don't sound like the rest of the world, they're too unique or interesting or different or whatever, well, maybe but if you send it to more people, then you would be able to build an entirely different, you'd be able to shift the whole palette in that direction, because you'd have much more, like, a much more variety of what was coming in, and so it wouldn't feel like one voice suddenly stuck out or something. So but by giving more opportunities and sending it out there and giving, like, more of a blanket and thinking a little bit more outside the box, you're going to be surprised at what comes back to you, and then what possibilities you have to build that base sound, you know. And then it's easier to go to your clients and say, like, hey, this combination of people could really work, you know what I mean? You're going to have more ammunition and more support for the thing you want to advocate for, if you do, like, send out and get more of those sides and get surprised.
I will say that the dubbing community, even on production side, is relatively small, and for those of you who are interested in work or mentorship, reach out to people. You'll actually find how surprisingly accessible a lot of us are. And if they're too busy, they're too busy, and there's no real harm, no foul. I think most people are quite lovely, and I know that I've worked with people who just have randomly reached out to me, who just wanted to learn. So if that is something that you guys are seriously considering, I would say take that risk and just kind of reach out. I had something in my brain and then it left my brain. Oh, I just wanted to point out that JP posted the link to that dubbing town hall if people are SAG-AFTRA members and want to register. The other thing I wanted to ask is there more particular for Casey and Melly, because you have been a lot of talk has been talked about like being put into boxes and stuff. What are some tips or tricks or things that you've done to promote your diverse vocal range? Interesting enough, I had a discussion. Oh, sorry, I got another text. You do not have to be a SAG-AFTRA member to go to the dubbing town hall. What I had an interesting discussion with a trans performer talking about slating, whether or not they should slate in character or should they slate in what their more, I don't know what the correct term is, the voice that they were more born with versus the voice
do
that they
you slate in your conversational voice versus the character's voice?
Right. And some I think, this performer might like their natural speaking voice might be one gender presenting, but then they're reading for another gender, which they can do, and so it's like, do they slate in the character, because will that switch like influence negatively the casting, or is it better because you can show your vocal range? So what are your guys' thoughts on that, and what do you guys do? Are there any tips and tricks to kind of like remind casting how wide your range is?
Take it away, Casey.
I do that because I like to give casting directors whiplash, just because it's funny, and I can just be like, slate in my normal voice and then do like a guy's voice or like some girl's voice. And they're just like, what the hell? What? And it's like, ha, yeah, I can do that. And it's not like a big deal, but that's just me. The person receiving it, it's down to the casting director to how they will take that. Are they going to take that as, what are you, this is scary, unknown territory, and some might freak out and go, oh, put in the bin, who knows, or some might, and some might look at that and go, holy crap, that's really freaking cool. And sometimes I've gotten that. Sometimes I would get that back being like, yo, you're slate, that's is that your normal voice? Yeah. And the character, that's still you, right? The character, yeah, yeah, that's still me. And they're just like, wow, very cool. I'm like, cool, thanks. But it's your mileage may vary. It depends on who it's being sent to. But some people like to keep it safer, and just keep it like if you're being more stealth about it, you can do your slate in a similar or the same vein of what the character you're reading. So that way it's not too different. That way it keeps it more, I don't want to say normal, like quote normal, you know what I mean? It just keeps it on more of a level. It's not going to be setting off any alarms in someone's head where they might go, whoa, what's this? Which is really easy to do in this industry sometimes. So, for me, I just do that. And I've gotten some surprisingly cool feedback from casting directors going, man, that was so unique. I'm gonna come back to you. And then, sometimes they do, and I'll get like precast in something like a couple months later, which just like happened to me. And they're just like, we're gonna put you in a thing now. I'm like, oh, is that from like my slate? Like, yeah. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And had I not done that, they wouldn't have known. Because it was like a first time sending something to the studio. So for me, I mean, it's hit or miss. There's no way to know for sure how it's going to be received, who will be receiving it, and how they're going to receive it. It's really just up to you and what you're comfortable with. It's up to, I think it's down to the actor and what the actor is okay with expressing. If they're comfortable expressing that they can change their voice that much, and they don't mind giving the director potential whiplash, then that is totally cool. But if not, and they would prefer to be more comfortable to keep it very on the DL, keep it on the down low, and not, you know, make any alarms go off in someone's head if they don't know how they're going to respond to something like this. That's also a very safe and valid choice too. But yeah, Melly, if you have anything to add on that.
Well, first thing I do is I've written a lot of studios and I say, send me everything. And trust me to know what not to read for, but I also might surprise you. I go back and forth. Lately, unless otherwise directed, I will slate at the end because I want them to decide if they like the performance before, I don't want it to come in with like I've done my share of, I go back and forth. I've done my share of just reading and conversational voice. I've done, like Melly Grant, the dragon, and lately I've been slating just in character voice so that there's continuity. But the last thing I want is, I don't want to read for like Dark Chemical Man and have the first thing they hear be Melly Grant, because I'm worried that they're going to be like, are you lost? Garbage.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly how I feel sometimes. You can do it, but it's scary.
But it's a revolving question for me. Like it starts with, for as many people who are willing to send me auditions for everything, send me auditions for everything, because I want to be able to submit for the guys as well and the monsters. And if it's not coming to my box, I can't read in the first place. Fortunately, nobody's really given me pushback on that, which has been cool. But the rest of it is kind of like in terms of the original question of like, how do you let people know? I don't know, dude. I'm still figuring that out. Like I said earlier, you only have so much time in a minute on your demo. I've contemplated doing, I have some regrets that my second or third character on my demo, I was talked into going younger than I really was comfortable doing. So I've contemplated switching that out so that it goes straight from like conversational female to like, young guy in the demo. So at least they get that immediate whiplash when they're listening to the demo. I've had people tell me they don't give a crap about visual reels, but I feel like the visual reel is important. And, you may feel free to disagree, but at least in my head, I feel like being able to show someone the proof of concept that I am in context in a show and that the voice works is really valuable. And so I've, for my part, I'm constantly hunting for new characters that I can actually, and I'm trying to get those characters under my belt so that I can have something to show someone where they can see like, oh, it's a dude, but like, it works. It's not in a void on a demo. It's like, I'm seeing it. This went to air. This was on Toonami, for instance. To me, that's a huge selling point that
damn right.
that shouldn't be understated, I feel like.
I think those are all really interesting points that everyone has brought up. There's another question here that I find interesting, especially it basically says, does being trans or non-binary ever come up when casting creatures or other non-human or non-gendered characters? Do you guys have you seen that in terms of the auditions you've received or the roles you received? In my personal experience, there was a show called Pink Fong that we dubbed. It's a Korean show, and when we were working on the show, we were not allowed to refer. None of the characters had gender, so everyone was they. I don't know if it ever came out in the show. Like, I don't know if the writing reflected that, but I just know internally, even production, because the Koreans were on the call, would not allow us to refer to any of the characters as he or she, despite, if whoever was voicing it. I don't believe the cast had any non-binary or trans performers, but the clients were adamant that the characters were non-binary, which I never had that experience before. So I was wondering if you guys have had that experience.
There's specifically with creatures, or can we talk more generally?
Well, yeah, you can feel free to talk more. I think the question was more about non-humanoid characters, but if you have a different story that kind of relates, like,
I guess I'll hit a few points really quickly. There's one or two studios that have sent auditions out that do make a point of pronouncing everything. And I'm sure it comes from a well-meaning place, but I occasionally have had moments where I'm going through the sides and I'm like, why is everything that says they, them like a freaking cat or a lizard?
Yep.
But if they're a human, there's a pronoun that is either he or she. And I've had that thought, like, is it well-meaning, or is it just their way of saying, maybe it's their inclusive, but like really poorly communicated way of saying we want to hear everybody. And they're not actually trying to say anything about the character, but I can't tell when it just says grobdoc, they, them, so that's a question that I don't know the answer to. And if you've ever done that on any of your breakdowns, please inform me. But then there have been other things that have come up, like, so weirdly enough, it's not part of their story at all, unless you are a junkie for subtext like I am sometimes. The last two characters I've played in anime have had, about as close to conflicting, it's localized, obviously this is from American expectations, like as close to what the heck was I just about to say? As close to pronouns that made me, that created a question mark there, I'll say, about like what their identity was. So in Assault Lily Bouquet, I was playing, they conveyed her to be a woman named Misuzu Kawazoe who used boku in self-describing. Okay. And I just played conceptually, I've been led to believe, a male character in Skate Leading Stars named Yukimitsu Mochizuki, who uses atashi in self-describing, which to those that aren't super familiar with that is somewhat in the vicinity of a male presented character using she, her, and a female presented character using he, him, sort of. And so I've had questions in the past where I've wanted to see if there was something we could do, because oftentimes we can't go rewriting the story for the Japanese creator, but maybe there's something. Like, I don't want to get in hot water here, but like, I don't want to make a prop out of a non-binary pronoun, but I've occasionally had the thought of like, well, what if we just either don't use pronouns or we use they, them? We either use their name or they, them, and you sort of could maybe create a little leeway where we're not actively rewriting the story, but it's kind of like a bit of a wink or a gesture to the fans that we're acknowledging the fact that there's some gray area with regard to the character's identity. And I think that would be cool. I've never been able to get that back to a writer. So I'm looking forward to having that pop up in a script that I'm writing at some point, so I can be the person that's having the conversation with production.
Quick question, because you mentioned the whole pronouns with the humans and then the animals. Would it feel better to you if instead of pronouncing all the roles, they just on the creatures said open to hearing, reads from, and then list like, what is that worse? What's better? Like, what makes you feel better or is less cringy, I guess, is my question.
I don't know that I care, but I've probably had the best mileage when it just like gets included on it. Either it gets included on both sets of sides, or if just everything is sent in one breakdown and you can choose to read for it if you'd like to. But Casey, Carrie, James.
I'm just thinking, like, going off kind of what you said, but like, it's hard when you get these audition sides and it is an alien or a monster or something that is not a real life thing that, so like, we need a voice for this non-binary. Okay, well, what the hell does non-binary sound like to you? What the hell do you want me to sound like? Because I can sound either masculine or feminine, and I don't want to flip a coin and go, I guess I'll do something more on the feminine side or maybe something on the masculine side, because the context of the breakdown will not say. There won't even be images of the characters. So I don't know what they want. I would rather them saying, instead of like, this dinosaur is non-binary, I'd rather them say, this dinosaur thing is leaning toward, more feminine sounding, could be non-binary, but leading more toward maybe an AFAB, or maybe an AMAB or something along those lines. So it's not just like, what do you want? Because it's not a sound.
Or
Like,
they have a lot of gravitas and we're looking for a voice that's a little textured.
yeah.
And then see
Yeah,
what
or like
people turn in.
give you like, instead of talking about the character's identity, talk about the character's like quality as like a character, and like
yes.
what they'll be doing, or what questions they have, or what struggles they have, or what relationships they have, or like put them in context of like the actual acting. So I just feel like,
and telling us if they're a large character or a small character. Are they a tiny or an enormous?
We're left with nothing but an empty, a script that's empty with no description, no nothing, only they're non-binary.
Well, also like anything that's like a sound that's like a medium pitched. You're like, well, what is medium pitched? Medium pitch is different for all of us. All of our voices are different. So I feel like those sound notes don't really help an actor activate their imagination to like tell a story. But if you talk about like who that dinosaur is, like what they're struggling with, or what their goal is, or what their objective is, or like are they like chaotic good, or you know what I mean, then like that something. I feel like at least gives an actor someplace to go something to come up with, especially for creatures when it can be so open, you know what I mean? And really what you need is the intention, because in the end what you need is the intention for the meaning anyway,
And if that becomes more commonplace, then we're gonna feel more comfortable experimenting. Because right now, at least for me, I'm still in this place where there have been some directors that send fantastic breakdowns, but there's still a paranoid part of me because of what all the other breakdowns look like. They're like, okay, I've got to research the hell out of the show to see if I'm eligible for this character. When maybe they're trying to communicate that they want to hear, that they want to be surprised, because the norm is still to get that like medium voice. Character. I assume like, okay, they didn't say it, which probably means that they are open to things, but man, I should probably watch the trailer, and now I'm gonna become super self-conscious if what I hear coming out of the character's mouth doesn't match something I feel like I can do, and then I self-sabotage. But hopefully we can, with more of the cool sides, it becomes more commonplace for us to care less and to experiment more. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not that I have a problem with them putting non-binary on everything like that. It's just like I'd like to see it on some humans too. That'd be pretty cool if the script and character or show, whatever game calls for it. But if it's just you're slapping that word, that label onto a character, I need some direction on where the hell to take it. Because I just sometimes I don't even read on these anymore, because I'm like, I don't know what you want, and I'll ask and be like, what more can you tell me about this show or character? It's all strictly NDA, we can't tell you anything, but here's like 4 lines, and they're non-binary, go. I'm like, do you want like it higher, like it more masculine sounding, feminine? Can't tell you. I'm like, okay, well,
it's okay to say that you want an androgynous voice.
Yeah, and you can, if
just
you
don't make it into an identity.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, if you want androgynous voice, you don't have to put non-binary. Crazy. Check this out, right? I'm gonna blow your minds. You can actually put, there's a young male androgynous voice. I know. What? You can do that. Holy crap. I know.
What? I feel like I know someone who sounds like that.
Yeah, I feel like there's gotta be someone around somewhere, someplace. Somewhere in some Zoom call that we might be in that fits that description a little bit. And androgynous is fine too, but you don't ever see androgynous as voice type. I've never seen that.
I think you're absolutely right. I'm trying to recall, like recently I've definitely seen sides out for just non-binary, a lot of non-binary AI and non-binary androidy robot-y. And then that's all, and because they're an AI or an android, they don't give you much in terms of character, And and as someone who is not non-binary, I also do not know what to do with it. So it's not helpful either. I'm always, I don't know what this sounds like, and I don't identify that way, so I'll just not read it.
And here's where it gets frustrating. Here's where it gets frustrating is that if you see an identity that you resonate with, and they're, in a well-meaning way trying to make that their breakdown, like that's the sound we're looking for, and so you give your authentic self to that read, and essentially what's happening is a door is being opened up for you to feel like you're not valid enough to play yourself, depending on the direction they go with that. And so I'd rather they leave that the hell alone, you know, unless they are, you know, unless they're telling that story authentically, like just don't slap an identity on a character that doesn't need one. Just that's me though.
No, I've shared that anxiety. I felt the same.
Well, I believe we're at time. Is JP there?
He's gone to bed long ago.
Is that a good place to stop? Do we feel?
No, I'm still here. I'm still here.
We could talk forever, I think, and there's so many things that we did not cover.
Well, I guess we'll just have to do it again.
We'll just have to do it again.
Oh, and how wonderful for the Halp Network to put all of your Twitter and Instagram handles.
Oh, I don't use Instagram. You guys are crazy.
Wow.
Thank you, Stephanie, so much for moderating this. This was amazing. Thank you to all of our panelists. You are all fantastic people.
Thank you.
Please, everybody out there, if you'd like, I always do the wrong direction. Follow them at the social media. And please visit queervox.org and get on our mailing list if you'd like to be a part of our Discord community, or if you'd just like to find out what we have going on in the future. We have classes, we have workshops, we have a robust Discord community. It was blowing up tonight. And we have a lot more in store. So thank you all again, and have a good night.
So much.
Guys.